Hello everyone and welcome to my BNB Metro official channel. Brooke called for help in the middle of the sea, Ridge gives a jump to the sea, Nick tries to pull the Ridge out of the seashore. The accident of Brooke, the SOS of Eric. Nick Marone's speedboat will drop Brooke Logan. The SOS of Eric Forrester. Let's talk about what's happening from August 4th to August 8th before moving on to the 2-weekers. The sight of Nick holding an engagement ring box will send Eric Forrester into a rage. Before Nick pops the question, Eric will pressure Ridge Forrester to approach Brooke. Brooke and Nick are already on the boat when Ridge rushes to the harbor. The accident of Brooke Logan. As the speedboat speeds through the sea, Brooke chooses to lie on top of it. Eventually, Brooke falls, of course. However, Ridge is close by and quickly arrives to save the day. He might change his mind after almost losing Brooke. But will Brooke and Ridge actually get back together just because he prevented her from drowning? True love is not the same as gratitude. With any luck, Brooke will simply thank Ridge and head out with Nick. However, I'm not sure if the soap opera authors share my opinion. We will thus have to wait and see which man Brooke chooses. Brooke tumbles in front of Ridge. Brooke Logan's water tumbles, as seen by Ridge Forrester. To begin with, Nick Marone will keep up the relationship and make an effort to persuade Brooke that she would be better off without Ridge. Nick will strive to impress Brooke and create a romantic atmosphere during this boat excursion because he is preparing for a marriage proposal. However, Nick recently received his troublesome boat back, which is the first of several reasons why things will go awry. It's likely that the boat isn't as fixed as Nick has been told because it has been experiencing problems. Furthermore, when Nick spots Ridge in the distance, safety won't exactly be his top concern. Nick will accelerate away and make some fast turns as Ridge begins shouting out to Brooke from the docks. When Brooke tumbles into the sea with a loud splash after falling over the rear of the boat, the journey will take a disastrous turn. Ridge will be shocked by that and quickly go into rescue mode. Brooke's scream wasn't a sound heard so much as felt, a raw, jagged tear in the fabric of the roaring afternoon, ripped from lungs already burning with swallowed seawater and terror, a desperate, guttural invocation against the vast, indifferent blue that had swallowed her whole. Out here, beyond the deceptive safety of the breakers, where the gentle turquoise of the shore dissolved into a churning, fathomless cobalt, she was less than a speck, a fragile doll tossed by forces ancient and immense. One moment, buoyed by a false sense of calm during a daring swim, the next, seized by a vicious, unseen current that felt like the cold, muscular arm of a leviathan, dragging her relentlessly towards the horizon. Her frantic kicks were futile protests against the ocean's implacable will, her arms, leaden and aching, sliced water that offered no purchase, only resistance. Salt stung her eyes, blurring the receding shoreline into a smudge of golden green, a paradise-turned mocking mirage. Panic, cold and absolute, squeezed her heart tighter than the water pressure. This wasn't a swim anymore, it was a sentence, a slow, suffocating erasure beneath the indifferent gaze of the sun. Every gasp was half water, the roar of the sea filling her ears, muting her thoughts until only one primal impulse remained, survival. With a surge born of pure animal desperation, she arched her neck, gulped a fleeting breath above a wave's crest, and unleashed that soul-shattering cry into the void, "Help! Please! Someone!" A plea hurled against the wind and the waves, a fragile human sound swallowed almost instantly by the ocean's immense, rumbling hunger. Her voice cracked, raw and broken, the syllables dissolving into terrified sobs as another wave crashed over her head, plunging her back into the chilling, silent green world beneath the surface, the light from above dimming, the pressure building in her ears and chest, the terrifying certainty that this scream might be her last conscious act settling over her like a shroud. On the sun-baked shore, the cry arrived as a chilling dissonance, a discordant note slicing through the lazy symphony of crashing waves, children's laughter, and distant radios. It wasn't loud, but it carried the unmistakable timbre of utter, abject terror, freezing the scene like a snapshot. Ridge, sprawled on a towel moments before, idly tracing patterns in the sand while half listening to Nick recount a business deal, felt the sound bypass his ears and strike directly into his spine. He was upright before conscious thought registered, his eyes scanning the chaotic expanse of water with laser focus, adrenaline flooding his system, turning the languid heat into a crackling electric current. He knew that voice, knew it in his marrow, knew the unique pitch of Brooke's fear like a familiar, unwelcome melody. There. A flash of pale skin, a frantic splash far too distant, a dark head vanishing beneath a swell. Time compressed, stretched, snapped. Rational calculation, distance, current, risk, was obliterated by a surge of protective instinct so profound it felt like a physical force detonating within him. Nick's voice, sharp with dawning alarm beside him, "Ridge, wait. Think. We need a boat," a lifeguard, was a meaningless buzz, a distant radio signal drowned out by the roaring in his own ears and the horrifying image of Brooke disappearing beneath the waves. Thinking was a luxury Brooke didn't have. With a guttural sound that was half snarl, half prayer, Ridge didn't run to the water, he launched himself through it. One powerful stride took him knee-deep, the next thigh-deep against the sucking undertow, and then, with a final explosive push off the yielding sand, he was airborne, a desperate arc cutting through the air before he cleaved the surface in a perfect, desperate dive, the cold shock of the water a mere footnote to the furnace of fear driving him forward, his powerful arms already churning, his legs kicking with piston-like fury, his entire being focused on that terrifyingly distant point where Brooke had been, his mind screaming her name silently against the engulfing sea. Ridge's dive wasn't graceful, it was pure, kinetic desperation. The impact with the water was jarring, a cold slap that did nothing to quench the fire in his chest. He surfaced gasping, orienting himself instantly, eyes stinging with salt, scanning frantically. There. A glimpse of flailing arms, a choked gasp swallowed by the next wave. He drove himself forward, each stroke a battle against the outgoing current that seemed determined to mock his efforts, pulling him sideways even as he fought towards Brooke. The distance, deceptive from shore, felt interminable. His lungs burned, muscles screamed in protest, but the image of Brooke's terrified face, glimpsed for a split second before another wave crashed over her, fueled him. He reached her just as she was pulled under again, her strength visibly failing. Lunging, his hand closed around her upper arm, slick and cold. He hauled her head above water with a strength born of terror. "Brooke! I've got you. Breathe," he yelled, his voice raw against the wind and water. Her eyes, wide with panic, locked onto his, recognition flashing through the haze of terror, followed by a sob that was half relief, half hysterical fear. "Ridge! Oh God," she gasped, choking, clinging to him with the ferocity of a drowning woman, her nails digging into his shoulders, her body convulsing with coughs and shudders. He wrapped an arm tightly around her chest, just under her arms, trying to keep her buoyant, her head above the churning surface. "I've got you, he repeated, a mantra against the chaos, already assessing the nightmare reality. The shore looked impossibly far, the current was relentless, and Brooke, exhausted and panicked, was dead weight. He started kicking fiercely, pulling with his free arm, angling diagonally against the current, aiming for a point downshore Nick was sprinting towards. Every stroke was agony, the drag immense, the ocean fighting him for every inch. Brooke coughed violently, her body limp against his, her struggles weakening into frightening passivity. "Stay with me, Brooke. Look at me. Stay awake," he commanded, his voice cracking with fear he couldn't mask. The shore seemed no closer. He redoubled his efforts, muscles screaming in protest, salt water burning his throat with every gasped breath, the weight of her life, the weight of their shared history, crushing him as surely as the ocean's depths. Nick watched Ridge's dive with a heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird, a cocktail of fear, fury, and helplessness churning in his gut. Fear for Brooke, visceral and sickening. Fury at Ridge's reckless, impulsive charge, the idiot hero complex that could get them both killed. Helplessness at his own position, stranded on the sand while the two people who represented the most complicated chapters of his life battled the ocean. He'd already sprinted down the beach, parallel to their agonizingly slow progress, shouting for help, waving frantically at a distant lifeguard stand, his own voice hoarse with panic. Now, seeing them struggle, seeing Brooke's head loll against Ridge's shoulder, seeing Ridge's strokes becoming visibly labored, Nick knew waiting was suicide. He plunged into the surf, the cold water shocking him into hyper-awareness. He waded out, deeper and deeper, the sandy bottom sloping treacherously, waves crashing against his chest, threatening to knock him off his feet. The undertow tugged greedily at his legs. He pushed further, until the water was up to his shoulders, the waves breaking over his head, forcing him to time his breaths. Ridge was maybe 15 yards out now, but caught in the grip of the current, making painfully slow headway towards him. "Ridge! This way! Over here!" Nick bellowed, cupping his hands around his mouth, spitting out salt water. He saw Ridge adjust his angle slightly, straining against the invisible force. Closer, agonizingly closer. Nick could see the utter exhaustion etched on Ridge's face, the way Brooke hung limply in his grip, her eyes half closed. "Hold on. Just a little further," Nick yelled, his voice thick with desperation. He braced himself, planting his feet as firmly as he could in the shifting sand, digging his toes in, leaning back against the surge, arms outstretched. The gap closed yard by tortuous yard. Finally, Ridge, with a final, gargantuan effort fueled by sheer will, surged forward on the crest of a wave, close enough for Nick to lunge. Nick's fingers brushed Ridge's forearm, slick with seawater. He grabbed, his grip tightening with desperate strength, feeling the incredible drag of two bodies fighting the ocean's pull. "I've got you. Pull, Ridge. Pull." Nick roared, hauling backwards with every ounce of strength he possessed, his muscles screaming, his feet slipping in the sand. It was a brutal tug-of-war against Neptune himself. Ridge kicked ferociously, adding his dwindling strength to Nick's anchor. For a heart-stopping moment, the ocean seemed to reclaim them, a powerful backwash sucking at their legs. Nick dug his heels in, leaning back almost horizontally, a guttural cry tearing from his throat as he pulled with the strength of absolute refusal to lose them, refusal to let the sea win. Inch by agonizing inch, against the immense, sucking resistance, he hauled Ridge, and Brooke secured within Ridge's failing grasp, through the pounding surf zone, the churning white water foaming around their waists, then their thighs, until finally, mercifully, they collapsed together onto the wet, solid sand beyond the reach of the waves, a tangled, gasping, sobbing heap of humanity, the roar of the ocean now a backdrop to the ragged symphony of their desperate breaths and Brooke's broken, shuddering cries. Eric Forrester, the patriarch whose usual aura was one of seasoned calm, stood frozen, his knuckles white where they gripped the edge of his imposing desk. His gaze was locked, horrified, on the small, velvet box momentarily revealed in Nick Marone's jacket pocket before it vanished again like a guilty secret. It wasn't just any box, its shape, its very promise, screamed engagement ring. The sight struck Eric like a physical blow, a surge of protective dread flooding his veins. Brooke Logan, the luminous, resilient woman who had been both daughter-in-law and the beating heart of his family for decades, was moments away from binding her life irrevocably to Nick, a man Eric respected but fundamentally distrusted with Brooke's fragile, passionate heart. The specter of past mistakes, of Ridge's painful waffling, of Brooke's enduring capacity to love deeply and be wounded profoundly, crashed over Eric. He couldn't stand idly by, not when he saw disaster looming like a storm cloud on the horizon. With trembling fingers that belied his usual composure, he snatched up the phone, urgency making his voice raw and ragged as he connected with his son, Ridge. "Ridge! Get to the harbor, now. Nick's got a ring. He's taking Brooke out on the boat, you have to stop this before it's too late. Move, son, move." The plea was a primal SOS, a father's desperate attempt to avert what he feared was a catastrophic error, driven by a love for Brooke that transcended mere family ties, viewing her happiness as intrinsically linked to the Forrester fabric itself. On the other end, Ridge Forrester, perpetually caught in the riptide of his own conflicting desires, felt the familiar, gut-wrenching lurch, the fear of losing Brooke, again. Eric's frantic words ignited a wildfire of possessiveness and regret within him. The image of Brooke, radiant and hopeful, accepting a ring from Nick, was anathema. He dropped everything, the sleek lines of his sports car becoming a blur as he tore through the city streets towards the marina, his mind a whirlwind of arguments, pleas, and the desperate hope that he wasn't already too late. Each red light was an agonizing eternity, each slow driver a personal affront to his mission. He could almost hear the ticking clock counting down the seconds to Brooke's potential yes, a sound that echoed the frantic pounding of his own heart. He envisioned the harbor, the sleek lines of Nick's speedboat, and Brooke stepping aboard, unknowingly sailing towards a future Ridge was convinced would only bring her pain he, in his complex way, believed only he could truly understand and perhaps even alleviate, if given one more chance. Meanwhile, out on the sparkling, sun-drenched expanse of the Pacific, freedom tasted like salt spray and exhilaration. Nick Marone, confident and charming, guided his powerful speedboat through the waves, the engine a throaty roar beneath them. Beside him, Brooke Logan laughed, the wind whipping her golden hair into a wild halo, the city's stresses momentarily forgotten. The vastness of the ocean, the speed, the sheer aliveness of the moment was intoxicating. Nick's hand rested possessively on her leg, his smile promising not just this adventure, but a lifetime of them. In a surge of uninhibited joy, a desire to fully embrace the wildness of the moment, Brooke, ever the impulsive romantic, decided to push the thrill further. With a carefree shout lost in the wind and engine noise, she clambered carefully onto the padded foredeck, lying flat on her back, arms outstretched like a figurehead. "Nick! Look! I'm flying," she cried, gazing up at the endless blue sky, feeling the powerful thrum of the boat vibrating through her body, the cool spray misting her skin. It was pure, unadulterated liberation, a symbolic casting off of past burdens. Nick, momentarily concerned but captivated by her radiant happiness, grinned back, perhaps misjudging the inherent danger, perhaps trusting the calm sea and his own skill. He maintained speed, the boat slicing through the water, Brooke's laughter ringing out like a bell. But the ocean is an unpredictable force. A slightly larger wave, an unexpected shift in current, or perhaps just the inherent instability of her position, in a sickening instant, the exhilarating flight became a terrifying fall. The boat hit a swell at just the wrong angle, bucking upwards. Brooke's grip, non-existent against the smooth fiberglass, failed utterly. With a sharp cry ripped from her throat, she was flung sideways, tumbling over the low gunwale like a discarded doll. The shock of the cold water was instantaneous and brutal, stealing her breath. The roar of the engine faded with terrifying speed as Nick, unaware for crucial seconds, continued onward, the boat rapidly shrinking into the distance, leaving Brooke alone, choking, disoriented, and suddenly engulfed by the terrifying, immense silence beneath the waves. Panic, cold and absolute, seized her as she fought the drag of her clothes, the salt water burning her eyes and throat. She kicked frantically, breaking the surface with a gasp, only to be slapped down by another wave. The shore seemed impossibly far, the vastness of the ocean suddenly a crushing, isolating prison. Fear, cold and sharp, cut deeper than the water. Back at the harbor, Ridge arrived in a screech of tires, his heart plummeting as he scanned the docks. Eric's worst fear, his own frantic race, it had all been for nothing. Nick's berth was empty. The sleek speedboat was gone, a mere speck on the horizon now. A curse tore from Ridge's lips, raw frustration and despair twisting his features. He'd failed. He was too late. Brooke was out there, with him, likely hearing a proposal that would seal her fate. The weight of it crushed him. He paced the dock like a caged animal, the helplessness of physical ache, his gaze locked on that distant speck, imagining the scene unfolding, each second a knife twist. Then, movement. Not the boat returning, but frantic activity on the water. He squinted, adrenaline surging anew. Was that? Recognition dawned with chilling clarity. A figure in the water, flailing, distant but unmistakable. Brooke. Terror, colder and more profound than any he'd known, obliterated every other thought. Without a second's hesitation, fueled by pure, unadulterated panic and a love that, despite everything, burned fiercer than ever in this moment of crisis, he leaped into the nearest launch he could commandeer, a smaller, agile craft. The engine roared to life under his frantic hands, and he gunned it, the boat leaping forward, carving a desperate white wake across the blue towards the spot where he'd seen her disappear beneath a wave. Time lost all meaning, there was only the target, the churning water where Brooke had been. He reached the area, killing the engine, his eyes scanning frantically, desperately. Brooke! His voice, raw and ragged, tore across the water. Then, a splash, a gasp, a glimpse of golden hair. She was struggling, weakening, going under again. Ridge didn't think, he acted. Plunging into the cold water, he swam the short distance with powerful strokes, reaching her just as another wave threatened to pull her down. He grabbed her, pulling her fiercely against him, her body limp and cold. "I've got you, Brooke. I've got you," he gasped, hauling her towards the boat, his own strength fueled by sheer terror and determination. He wrestled her aboard, collapsing beside her on the deck, his hands immediately going to her face, checking for breath, for life, his own chest heaving with exertion and fear. "Brooke? Brooke, look at me. Breathe, honey, just breathe." The relief as she coughed, spewing seawater, and opened her eyes, dazed and terrified, was a tidal wave that nearly drowned him. She was alive. He had her. He'd saved her. In the trembling aftermath, huddled on the deck of the small boat, wrapped in a rough emergency blanket Ridge found, Brooke shivered violently, the shock of the near drowning still reverberating through her system. Her gaze met Ridge's, filled with a profound gratitude that shimmered with unshed tears. "Ridge, you saved me," she whispered, her voice hoarse from saltwater and fear. The intensity in his eyes, the raw terror she'd glimpsed before he jumped in, the desperate strength with which he'd pulled her from the abyss, it was undeniable, overwhelming. In that visceral moment, stripped bare of their complicated history, he was her hero, her lifeline. And Ridge, holding her, feeling the fragile warmth of her life returning, felt a seismic shift within himself. The sight of her pale, vulnerable, almost lost forever, cut through layers of indecision, resentment, and other entanglements. The primal fear of losing her crystallized into a terrifying clarity: he couldn't lose her. Not to Nick, not to the ocean.